transforms a respected enemy commander into a source of genuine concern for one of history's most celebrated military tacticians. In February 1943, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox who had dominated North African warfare for nearly 3 years, found himself facing a phenomenon he had never encountered before. An American general whose tactical unpredictability and aggressive tempo would force the German Afrika Korps to fundamentally reconsider their strategic assumptions about American combat effectiveness. The North African theater in early 1943 presented a complex military puzzle. German and Italian forces under Rommel's command controlled vast stretches of Tunisia, having established defensive positions that leveraged the region's natural geographic advantages. The Atlas Mountains provided natural barriers, while the coastal plains offered limited avenues of approach for attacking forces. Rommel had spent months studying Allied patterns, developing countermeasures for what he perceived as predictable British tactical doctrine and untested American military capabilities. The technological landscape favored combined arms warfare. German panzer divisions relied on the Panzer Mark III and Mark IV tanks, supported by the formidable Panzer Mark VI Tiger, which had begun appearing in limited numbers. The Americans fielded M4 Sherman tanks, technically inferior to German armor, but available in quantities that could overwhelm through numerical superiority. Artillery remained the decisive arm, with German 88mm guns serving dual roles as anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons, while American 105mm howitzers provided reliable fire support. Intelligence networks on both sides had developed sophisticated understanding of enemy capabilities and limitations. German reconnaissance units had spent months cataloging British Eighth Army movements, identifying patterns in Montgomery's methodical approach to offensive operations. American forces represented an unknown quantity, having suffered their first major defeat at Kasserine Pass just weeks earlier. German intelligence assessments suggested American troops lacked combat experience and would require extensive time to develop effective tactical procedures. The command structure reflected this intelligence picture. Rommel maintained operational flexibility through decentralized command, allowing subordinate commanders considerable latitude in executing missions within his overall strategic framework. His reputation for appearing unexpectedly on battlefields had become legendary, creating psychological pressure on enemy forces who never knew when the Desert Fox might personally intervene in tactical situations. American command arrangements in North Africa reflected organizational inexperience with large-scale combat operations. The WWII Corps, America's primary ground combat formation in Tunisia, had undergone command changes following Kasserine Pass. Standard operating procedures emphasized methodical preparation, extensive logistical coordination, and careful integration with British forces operating in the same theater. American doctrine prioritized firepower and material superiority over tactical innovation, reflecting industrial capacity rather than battlefield experience. Weather patterns in Tunisia during early 1943 created additional tactical complications. Spring rains transformed many roads into impassable mud, limiting mechanized movement to established routes that German forces had already registered for artillery fires. Temperature variations between day and night affected equipment performance and soldier endurance, particularly for American forces still adapting to desert conditions. The logistical situation favored defensive operations. German supply lines, though stretched across the Mediterranean, had established reliable delivery schedules for ammunition, fuel, and replacement equipment. Rommel had learned to operate with minimal logistical margins, accepting calculated risks to maintain operational tempo. American logistics, by contrast, emphasized abundant supply accumulation before initiating offensive operations, a doctrine that telegraphed intentions to German intelligence observers. Political pressures influenced tactical decisions on both sides. German High Command expected Rommel to maintain defensive positions while conserving forces for potential redeployment to other theaters. Hitler's directive prohibited voluntary withdrawal from any territory, forcing tactical commanders to defend positions regardless of strategic merit. American political leadership demanded visible progress to justify continued investment in the Mediterranean theater, creating pressure for offensive action even when tactical conditions remained unfavorable. The broader strategic context of early 1943 shaped operational planning. German forces faced pressure on multiple fronts, with Soviet winter offensives consuming resources on the Eastern Front, while Allied bombing campaigns targeted industrial capacity in Germany itself. American industrial production had reached full capacity, producing equipment at rates that could replace combat losses, while building strategic reserves for future operations. Communication systems reflected technological capabilities of the period. German forces relied on radio networks that provided rapid coordination between widely separated units, though transmissions remained vulnerable to Allied interception and cryptographic analysis. American communication procedures emphasized security over speed, often requiring time-consuming authentication protocols that slowed tactical coordination. Training backgrounds differed significantly between the opposing forces. German officers and non-commissioned officers possessed extensive combat experience gained through nearly 4 years of continuous warfare across multiple theaters. American personnel brought industrial management skills and technological familiarity, but lacked practical experience with combat leadership under stress. This experience gap had contributed to American tactical failures at Kasserine Pass, where German forces exploited American inexperience to achieve tactical surprise and operational success. The physical environment of Tunisia created unique challenges for mechanized warfare. Rocky terrain limited cross-country movement for tracked vehicles, while sandy areas could trap wheeled vehicles without warning. Water sources remained scarce, requiring careful logistical planning to sustain large formations during extended operations. Dust clouds generated by vehicle movement provided excellent intelligence for enemy observers, making tactical surprise difficult to achieve through conventional means. The fundamental problem facing German operations in Tunisia stemmed from a dangerous assumption that had served Rommel well throughout his North African campaigns. Enemy behavior remained predictable enough to permit effective countermeasures. For 3 years, this assumption had proven correct. British forces under various commanders had demonstrated consistent tactical patterns that German intelligence could catalogue and exploit. Methodical preparation phases preceded offensive operations. Artillery concentrations followed established procedures. Armored formations advanced along predictable routes toward obvious objectives. This predictability had allowed Rommel to achieve tactical surprise repeatedly, positioning forces to counter British movements before they could develop momentum. German defensive positions had been cited to channel British attacks into killing zones where concentrated firepower could achieve decisive effects. Rommel's personal reconnaissance had identified key terrain features that British commanders would inevitably attempt to seize, allowing German forces to prepare elaborate defensive schemes in advance. American forces at Kasserine Pass had confirmed German expectations about Allied predictability. Initial American attacks followed doctrine learned from British advisors, emphasizing careful coordination and methodical advancement. When German counterattacks developed, American units withdrew in patterns that German intelligence had anticipated, allowing pursuing forces to exploit tactical success into operational advantage. The battle had validated German assumptions about American inexperience and tactical inflexibility. However, Intelligence reports reaching German headquarters in February 1943 began indicating troubling changes in American operational patterns. Reconnaissance units reported unusual American activity that did not conform to established Allied procedures. American forces appeared to be conducting training exercises that emphasized rapid movement over careful preparation. Equipment concentrations suggested offensive preparations, but the timing and location did not match British operational schedules. The most disturbing reports concerned command arrangements within American forces. A new commander had assumed control of two corps following Kasserine Pass, but German intelligence possessed limited information about his background or tactical preferences. Standard intelligence profiles relied on analyzing previous combat performance to predict future behavior. But this commander's experience came primarily from training exercises rather than actual combat operations. This lack of data created an unprecedented intelligence gap at a critical moment. German tactical doctrine assumed that effective countermeasures could be developed for any enemy approach given sufficient observation time. Rommel had built his reputation on rapid analysis of enemy intentions, followed by aggressive counteraction that disrupted enemy plans before they could mature. This approach required understanding enemy decision-making patterns, particularly the predictable relationship between preparation time and offensive capability. The new American commander's initial actions defied this analytical framework. Instead of the extensive preparation period that doctrine suggested would be necessary following a major defeat, American forces began conducting aggressive reconnaissance operations within days of assuming new leadership. These operations did not follow British patterns, nor did they conform to standard American procedures observed during previous engagements. Patrols operated at extended distances from main body positions, gathering intelligence through direct observation rather than methodical surveillance techniques. German response procedures had been developed to counter methodical Allied operations that provided advance warning of intended actions. Artillery positions could be shifted to counter known Allied preferences for specific approach routes. Armor reserves could be positioned to exploit predictable Allied tactical weaknesses. Air support could be concentrated against obvious Allied objectives during scheduled offensive operations. None of these procedures addressed the challenge of countering operations that provided no advance warning of intentions or timing. The problem extended beyond tactical unpredictability to operational tempo. German planning assumed that Allied forces required specific preparation periods before conducting effective operations. Equipment maintenance, personnel rest, logistical accumulation, and coordination meetings all required measurable time periods that German intelligence could observe and analyze. This preparation time provided German commanders with opportunities to adjust their own dispositions to counter anticipated Allied moves. American operations under the new commander eliminated these preparation phases, conducting offensive operations with minimal observable preparation. German intelligence could not identify the indicators that had previously allowed accurate prediction of Allied intentions. Equipment moved at night without establishing the obvious supply concentrations that had characterized previous operations. Personnel rotations occurred without the lengthy coordination procedures that had telegraphed British operational timing. Communication intercepts provided additional evidence of changing American procedures. Previous American radio traffic had followed predictable schedules and authentication procedures that allowed German intelligence to develop accurate assessments of Allied capabilities and intentions. The new command implemented communication procedures that reduced German intelligence collection opportunities while maintaining effective coordination between widely separated American units. The psychological impact on German units began manifesting within weeks of the command change. Soldiers who had developed confidence in their ability to predict and counter Allied operations found themselves facing tactical situations that did not conform to established patterns. Forward observation posts reported American movement patterns that seemed to indicate offensive preparations, only to discover that American forces had withdrawn during darkness, without conducting expected attacks. German defensive positions had been cited based on analysis of previous Allied operational preferences, but American forces began demonstrating willingness to attack objectives that German intelligence had assessed as tactically unattractive. Supply routes that British forces had avoided due to terrain difficulties became targets for American operations that accepted tactical risks in exchange for operational surprise. Communication centers that had remained secure due to their apparent inaccessibility suddenly required reinforcement against unexpected American pressure. The cumulative effect created a tactical environment where German advantages in experience and equipment could not be effectively employed because German commanders could not accurately predict where and when those advantages would be needed. Rommel's personal reconnaissance, previously his most valuable tactical tool, became less effective because American operations developed too rapidly for traditional analytical procedures to generate useful intelligence. Reserve positioning became problematic when German commanders could not predict the timing, location, or objective of American operations. Mobile reserves positioned to counter anticipated attacks found themselves too distant from actual combat zones to influence tactical outcomes. Artillery units registered to support defensive positions found American attacks developing against unregistered objectives that required time-consuming fire adjustment procedures. The most troubling aspect of this tactical transformation involved its apparent sustainability. Previous Allied innovations had proven temporary, reverting to established patterns once initial surprise effects dissipated. American operations under new leadership demonstrated consistent unpredictability that suggested systematic rather than accidental tactical changes, indicating that German forces might need to develop entirely new countermeasures for an enemy whose behavior could not be accurately predicted through traditional intelligence methods. George Smith Patton, Jr. entered the North African theater, carrying tactical philosophies that contradicted every assumption German intelligence had developed about American military capabilities. Born into a military family in California, Patton had spent his career studying warfare with an intensity that transformed theoretical knowledge into practical aggression. His background combined traditional military education with unconventional approaches to battlefield leadership that would prove incompatible with German expectations about American command procedures. Patton's military education at West Point had emphasized engineering and mathematics, providing him with technical understanding of military equipment and logistics procedures. However, his personal interests focused on military history and cavalry tactics, subjects that emphasize mobility and psychological impact over methodical preparation. This combination created a tactical philosophy that valued rapid decision-making and aggressive execution over careful planning and coordination procedures that characterize standard American doctrine. His early career experiences in Mexico and France during World War I had reinforced these tactical preferences. Tank operations in 1918 had demonstrated the effectiveness of aggressive leadership and rapid exploitation of tactical opportunities. Patton had observed how mechanical failures and communication breakdowns could paralyze methodical operations, while aggressive commanders maintained momentum through personal leadership and tactical improvisation. Between wars, Patton had continued studying military history while developing expertise in mechanized warfare. His analysis of German blitzkrieg operations in Poland and France had identified speed and psychological shock as decisive factors that could overcome material disadvantages. He had also studied British operations in North Africa, identifying tactical patterns that he believed made British forces predictable and therefore vulnerable to effective German countermeasures. The command philosophy Patton brought to Tunisia rejected the methodical preparation procedures that characterized American military doctrine. His experience with training exercises had convinced him that extensive planning often created tactical rigidity that prevented effective response to changing battlefield conditions. Instead, he emphasized rapid decision-making based on incomplete information, accepting tactical risks in exchange for operational surprise and psychological advantage over enemy forces. Patton's approach to personnel leadership differed dramatically from standard American procedures that emphasized committee-style decision-making and extensive consultation with subordinate commanders. His leadership style involved personal visibility on battlefields, direct communication with frontline units, and immediate tactical adjustments based on battlefield observations rather than staff analysis. This approach eliminated the preparation time that German intelligence had learned to recognize as advance warning of American operations. His understanding of combined arms warfare emphasized coordination through tempo rather than detailed planning. Artillery support would be arranged through rapid communication rather than extensive preparation, accepting reduced accuracy in exchange for immediate availability. Air support would be coordinated through direct contact with pilots rather than elaborate command procedures, prioritizing responsiveness over systematic coverage. Tank operations would exploit opportunities as they developed, rather than following predetermined routes towards scheduled objectives. The tactical doctrine Patton implemented in Tunisia reflected his belief that psychological factors often determined battlefield outcomes more decisively than material advantages. German forces had developed confidence in their ability to predict and counter Allied operations, creating tactical assumptions that could be exploited through unexpected approaches. American forces could gain decisive advantages by operating in ways that German commanders had not prepared to counter. His emphasis on reconnaissance differed from both British and standard American procedures. Instead of methodical intelligence gathering, followed by analysis and planning, Patton insisted on rapid reconnaissance that provided immediate information for tactical decision-making. Patrols would gather intelligence through aggressive contact with enemy forces rather than careful observation from concealed positions, accepting tactical losses in exchange for immediate information about enemy capabilities and dispositions. Communication procedures under Patton's command prioritized speed over security, reversing standard American practices that emphasized elaborate authentication procedures. Radio discipline focused on brevity and clarity rather than comprehensive coordination, allowing rapid tactical adjustments without time-consuming consultation procedures. This approach reduced German intelligence collection opportunities while maintaining effective coordination between American units operating across extended frontages. The logistical philosophy Patton implemented challenged American doctrine that required extensive supply accumulation before conducting offensive operations. His approach emphasized operational sustainability through rapid movement that prevented enemy forces from organizing effective defensive responses. Supply requirements would be minimized through aggressive tactics that achieved decisive results quickly rather than sustained operations that required extensive logistical support. Training procedures implemented under Patton's command focused on tactical flexibility and rapid decision-making rather than systematic execution of predetermined procedures. Units practiced conducting operations with minimal preparation time, developing capabilities for immediate response to tactical opportunities. Squad and platoon leaders received training that emphasized initiative and personal responsibility rather than adherence to established procedures. His approach to terrain analysis emphasized mobility and surprise, rather than defensive advantages and supply routes that characterized British operational planning. American forces would seek tactical opportunities through rapid movement across terrain that German intelligence had assessed as impassable or tactically unattractive. This approach would exploit German defensive preparations that assumed American forces would operate along predictable routes toward obvious objectives. The most significant aspect of Patton's tactical philosophy involved his rejection of proportional response to German actions. Instead of matching German tactical innovations with systematic countermeasures, American forces would maintain constant offensive pressure that prevented German commanders from implementing their preferred defensive procedures. This approach required accepting tactical casualties in exchange for psychological pressure that would force German forces to react continuously rather than implementing planned operations. German intelligence officers attempting to develop tactical profiles for Patton encountered unprecedented difficulties because his previous experience provided limited information about his likely behavior under combat conditions. Training exercise performance did not translate directly to combat effectiveness, particularly for commanders whose tactical philosophy emphasized improvisation over systematic procedures. Previous combat experience in World War I involved tactical conditions that bore little resemblance to mechanized warfare in North Africa. The personality traits that Patton demonstrated during his initial weeks commanding the II Corps suggested tactical approaches that German intelligence had never encountered from Allied commanders. His willingness to accept tactical risks for psychological advantage contradicted German assumptions about American risk tolerance. His emphasis on personal battlefield presence challenged German expectations about American command procedures that relied heavily on staff coordination and methodical decision-making processes. The transformation of American tactical behavior became unmistakably apparent during the third week of March 1943, when Patton launched Operation WWII against German positions near Gafsa. The operation violated every principle of Allied doctrine that German intelligence had catalogued during 3 years of North African warfare. Instead of the methodical preparation and obvious telegraphing of intentions that had characterized previous Allied operations, American forces moved with speed and directness that caught German defenders completely unprepared. German defensive positions around Gafsa had been established based on careful analysis of British tactical preferences and presumed American capabilities. Artillery positions covered approach routes that previous Allied operations had utilized. Tank barriers channeled expected Allied attacks into killing zones where concentrated German firepower could achieve decisive effects. Reserve positions allowed rapid reinforcement of threatened sectors according to established German tactical procedures. The American attack began before dawn on March 17th without the extensive artillery preparation that German doctrine expected from Allied operations. Instead of